Coming up on episode 45 of Fresh Freedom, Senior Heritage Fellow Mike Gonzalez joins us to unpack President Trump's DEI purge, the NPR funding fight, and the death of identity politics. Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast featuring freedom-focused representatives who are fighting for conservative values and defending your constitutional rights. I'm Nate Lucas, joined as always by Representative Eric Burleson from Missouri's 7th Congressional District. And our special guest is Mr. Mike Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez is a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, specializing in identity politics, critical race theory, and cultural policy. He spent nearly 20 years as a journalist and also served in the George W. Bush administration, a distinguished author. It's such an honor to have you on Fresh Freedom with us. Welcome.
I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me on.
So it was 2 weeks ago, I guess, the DOJ subcommittee held a hearing, Anti-American Airwaves, holding the heads of NPR and PBS accountable. Mr. Burleson, you sit on the subcommittee, and I think by and large, this has been a piñata for Republicans for a long time as to wondering, why do we have these entities?
Yeah, and it ends up being the left kind of makes this, you're trying to attack Mr. Rogers and Big Bird. And I just, in my line of questioning, I tried to make the point that, look, let's ask it another question. Should I fund PBS or do I fund Veterans Care? Do I fund, shore up Social Security, make sure there's no cuts in retiree people's pensions? Or do we continue to fund the, NPR and Nova, which I love Nova, but I would watch it even if there were advertisements, right? And the question is, why are we sending money to Big Bird and to, Daniel Tiger when we're not sending money to Doc McStuffins and all the other stuff? And so it's just, to me, it's no longer a needed function of government.
I would assume you agree wholeheartedly. You've been fighting this battle.
More than that. I mean, when the Democrats came out with Big Bird and Elmo and the Cookie Monster and all that, I thought it was in a time machine. It's like they're unaware that 10 years ago, Big Bird and Sesame Street found a corporate sugar daddy in HBO. And now their HBO has dropped their contract. They're looking for another, but they got millions of dollars. In fact, I went back to one of my co-witnesses was PBS CEO Paula Kerger. And you know how many times she mentioned Sesame Street in her testimony? 0. She never mentioned Sesame Street because it's no longer a thing. These congressmen, they were just playing it up with pictures. They thought they were cute with pictures of Elmo. However, the word local, she mentioned 65 times because the new talking point is two on their face laughable propositions. One is that you need NPR and PBS to have local coverage of news. And that without local coverage of news, you don't have democracy. So ergo, no NPR, no democracy. That's a syllogism. And the other local issue that's also laughable is that you need it for early warning weather emergencies. And I think, Congressman, it's time we call. That's also ridiculous, by the way. Alaska has, I think, 92% broadband penetration. And Alaska they always talk about hard-to-reach states, and Alaska is Exhibit A for the hard-to-reach state. Let's call their bluff. Let's say, if you care about this so much, let's reduce the CPB to this function. And so instead of $535 million, the taxpayer is spending $15 million on this issue.
Even at my district, when there's a tornado coming through, nobody that I know of turns to NPR. They're listening to KTTS because it's a private station. They pride themselves on covering the weather really well. They don't get taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, no, but I mean, we all have iPhones. It snows here in Washington. And how do I know? Because I have the weather app.
Right.
I mean, you don't need NPR to tell you if the weather's frozen. That is ridiculous.
Representative Jasmine Crockett took it in an interesting direction, and it kind of tells you everything you need to know. But she said she's going to skip off real quick. That was her preface to going into a rant. But then she said Republicans want to shut down, quote, everybody that is not Fox News. I guess where she's missing the beat is that Fox News, even MSNBC, those are private entities. They have to go out and acquire their own advertising. They have to act as a private corporation. NPR and PBS were created to be educational in nature, if you go back to LBJ's Great Society, which you pointed out in your opening statement.
And that's really the crux of it, the unfairness that you have a biased and demonstrably biased two networks, and the other networks, by the way. Public broadcasting also includes American Public Media. They used to include Democracy Now! I don't know, but there's a whole bunch of things. They are demonstrably biased, and I gave the facts, I gave the data in my testimony. The issue is they're asking all Americans to pony up for the the contribution of $535 million a year is actually going to go up. They asked for more this year, but then the CR they only got $535 million. How do they justify this to themselves? They know they're biased. All those people who were sitting in the gallery behind Catherine Marr, sorry about this, and Paula Kirker, they all knew that they were liberals and that everybody else was a liberal. How do they justify to themselves that they should have the money of conservatives? I don't understand.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the original argument that people tried to make is that we don't really have the availability of any kind of educational programming. So, at a time when people were just watching broadcast television and listening to broadcast radio, you had just NBC, CBS, and eventually ABC. And then there was like, well, how are we going to get some non-corporate content, and that's why we fund PBS. But today, this is why in my line of questioning, I mentioned town criers. Right. It's like at one point in time, government paid people to stand on the corner. Even in America, there was a time where the government paid people to stand on the corner and read the news because most people were illiterate. That's not the case anymore. So point to me. We don't pay town criers anymore for a good reason. And the same thing with this. Why are we funding something when there is a plethora of information, educational content, everything that they're aspiring to provide is readily available everywhere without government money being subsidizing it?
That was an excellent point you made. I'm considerably older than you. Back then, we had three networks. Back in the early 70s, LBJ creates the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CPB, in 67, and then NPR and PBS are created in the early 70s. And we had, as you said, CBS, ABC, and NBC. We had John Chancellor, David Brinkley, and Walter Cronkite. Mm-hmm. Walter Cronkite, actually, he used to end every show by saying, and that's the way it was today, April 14th, 1974, because that's the way it was. We all watched the same broadcast. Everybody at the water cooler the next day or at school commented on this because everybody watches the same thing. So PBS increases the networks by 33%. They go from 3 to 4. Today we have a plethora of channels. We have 4 million podcasts. Yeah. The vast majority of those have come online in the last 3 or 4 years. Joe Rogan alone has over 40 million subscribers. So we're in a completely different environment, as you put it, still employing the town crier. But it's not, there are many, many reasons. It's unfair to the private sector competitors. It's a regressive tax. It basically takes money from hardworking families and gives it to the super affluent. I don't care about race at all, but it's mostly white audience that lives in the Northeast and in California. But the main argument is that it is biased content.
Absolutely.
And this is an injustice that cannot go on, Congressman.
The left would be losing its mind if we flipped the table, flipped the script, and we came in and we were it would be intellectually dishonest. But if we said, instead of funding these left-leaning organizations, we're going to fund the Daily Wire. We're going to fund Breitbart, all this conservative content and media, right? that, and the left would lose their mind. But all we're saying is, why is any taxpayer dollar funding any of this content?
And by the way, that social media, people have come after me. I said, no, this is nuts. You're not getting it. We should get that money and give it to Fox or give it to Newsmax. It's like, no, I would be completely against that on principal reasons. Yeah. For the reasons you said. No, the thing, and I think it will end. It has to end. By the way, PBS and NPR will continue. They put a good product. If you're a liberal, and I don't care that it will continue. By the way, people say to me, Mike, you're not getting this. You're going to throw NPR and PBS even more into the hands of George Soros and Mackenzie Scott and the Tides Foundation. These are all very very lefty funders. My answer is, I don't care. I'm not Catherine Marr, the CEO of NPR. I don't want to extinguish opposing voices. Mm-hmm. I don't care that MSNBC and the New York Times exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's healthy for free speech and for a society of people that want to be educated and vote. Right. I think it's good that we have alternate voices.
I'm a consumer of it. The only thing is, it's unjustifiable, unfair, immoral, actually, to ask the half of the country, probably more than half of the country that is conservative, to pay for a news service that denigrates them day in and day out.
Catherine Marr, very interesting. Everyone's probably seen the clip where she goes, truth is a distraction from getting things done. And then she was asked at this hearing what percentage of her editorial board are registered Democrats, to which the answer to that was 100%. 87 out of 87, all registered Democrats. How is there any element of not being biased?
That's the Washington News Bureau. And that was something that Yuri Berliner said. Yuri Berliner said exactly a year ago now. This is a piece that appeared in the Free Press in April 2024. And for Catherine Marr to say to you and to the other members of Congress, if that is true, is very concerning. My goodness, she's had 12 months to find out. This was a big story. He resigned because they made his life impossible. They put him on administrative leave. Yeah. Why hasn't she found out if this is true?
Yeah, she can't deny that was not something that they've had discussions about. I mean, how do you...
If that is true, it's very concerning. Well, in that case, Ms. Marr, it's very concerning.
Right, because how many whistleblowers from NPR had come out with articles like that? Like, that's the
thing is that
seminal moment.
They did the same thing to Juan Williams in 2010. Juan Williams, this guy, Yuri Berliner, worked at NPR for 25 years. And Juan worked at least at NPR for at least that. And he had the wrong opinion, and they fired him. Not only did they fire him, they did the same thing they're doing to Berliner now. They assassinated his character. Mm-hmm. They said he was a psycho. They said he needed to go to a psychiatrist. So they are a very insulated cadre of people who only I'm quoting Juan almost verbatim, who are not used to listening to people with different views, because why would they? Because nobody in their office has different views, and very uncomfortable when they talk to somebody with different views. I know. Look, I'm a denizen of Washington, the Washington area. I know these people. They're very. They have on the bumper sticker, they have something that says coexist, but they don't like to coexist.
That's a good point.
So true. I think we had the clip of Representative Robert Garcia, who had a bunch of props, and let's just roll the clip here.
We're here to attack NPR and PBS. Now, Ms. Kerger, the American people want to know, is Elmo now, or has he ever been, a member of the Communist Party of the United States? A yes or no?
No.
Now, are you sure, Ms. Kerger? Because he's obviously red.
Well, he is a puppet, but no.
But let's talk about somebody else. Let's talk about Cookie Monster. Now, we know that Health Secretary RFK Jr. is coming out against fast food and baked goods. Are we silencing pro-cookie voters, yes or no?
But cookies are a sometime food.
Let's also talk about the most important, maybe, character on Sesame Street. This is actually Big Bird. Now, Ms. Kerger, since Elon Musk actually fired USDA workers who have been working on the bird flu, does it make sense to also fire Big Bird? Yes or no?
We would like to keep Big Bird.
Now, I will admit, though, the extreme liberal agenda that you're all pushing, I think, doesn't stop there. This, of course, is Bert and Ernie. Now, these two guys actually live together. They're friends. They're supportive of each other. Ms. Kerger, an important question. Are Bert and Ernie part of an extreme homosexual agenda?
No.
Now, I'm obviously using some humor here, but the fact that we're sitting here today talking about defunding public television is actually not funny. At a time where we can't agree on basic facts, and while the free press is under attack, we need public media like PBS and NPR more than ever. Public broadcasting is a tool for education, for emergencies, and a cherished part of our national fabric. We get huge benefits from a tiny federal investment. So the message, I think, today is very, very simple. If we're going to get rid of any puppeteers, we should get rid of the one that's actually controlling Donald Trump. Fire Elon Musk and save Elmo.
Well, I'm sorry I had to see that again.
These
That
are
was
not
so
serious
unfunny.
people.
They're not
That's
serious.
not
That-
a serious.
Yeah, completely.
And her responses were so quick. It to me is tipping the hand that they had planned beforehand.
Ms. Kerger, I feel for her because, like me, we members of my family that I told I was going to be on the committee said, like, "Were you on it? We didn't see you because we were just, Catherine Marr just decided to self-immolate, and so she got all the attention, and we just sat there listening and watching her. I mean, like, for my purposes, for the purposes of the American people, it was a great hearing because Catherine Marr did such an awful job. But which meant, though, like that lasted about over 2 hours. I probably spoke for like 3 minutes of it because all the attention, rightly, was focused on Catherine Marr. Same thing for Paula Kerger. She didn't have that much to say.
Yeah, that's what the Democrats have gotten in. Their pattern is we have these topics. Most of them are indefensible. And so rather than talk about the merits of the bill, they go into hyperbole, they go into attacking the messenger, and then they want to it always comes around to how can we attack Trump, right? And how can we, so this week, I know, for example, we're going to have a hearing on empty building spaces in their DOJ committee. And this is something that should be universal. Like we should all figure out how we can maximize space, save money for the taxpayers. But yet we're pretty confident. We know that all they're going to talk about is Trump and the tariffs, and that's what they're going to spend all this time.
Yeah, I feel for you. Having to work in Congress. She actually distorted what I said in my testimony when she said that I had said that NPR and PBS were a danger to the public, to the national polity, because they had reported on the killing of George Floyd. Mm-hmm. That's not at all. And then she followed up by asking Catherine Marr and Paula Kerger, do you agree with that? Do you agree that it was wrong to report on the killing of George Floyd? And they said no. I would have said no to that myself. I'm a former journalist. Of course you report on major events, and that was a major event. That's not what I said in my testimony at all. I said that they just repeated the line. They made it part of their narrative that America, as a result of the George Floyd tragedy, that America is systemically racist and that America is an oppressive society. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I quoted Yuri Berliner, who said on the same issue, we have a very powerful tool to discover if these propositions are right. Journalism. Journalism is available to discover whether America is indeed systemically racist. What is systemic racism? Do we really have it in this country? I fervently said that no, we don't. There are ugly racists in our society, but we don't have systemic racism. But that's what I said. So she misrepresented my views. Then she had a lot of theater asking Catherine Marr and Paula Kerger. I wrote a letter to Chairwoman Green, who included my letter on the record. It was now on the public record of the U.S. Congress that she distorted my view, and I wrote a column about it.
That's great. Great way to fight back, because you have to punch back.
You do. Just to your point that they don't use their 5 minutes of questioning for really anything purposeful. I mean, Representative Stephen Lynch went for 5 minutes talking about the Signal chat in a hearing that had nothing to do.
Right.
I mean, how it's just
because that's all they had at the moment.
Yeah.
They thought they had something real.
I don't, from your perspective, I would have to imagine that you're just sitting there and feel like you're wasting.
And one part of the line of questioning that I wanted that if I had time to go down was that there's on PBS on PBS there's some series that's called Perspectives or something like that, and they have had a lot of episodes that are very very liberal in the culture war stuff, right? Like the perspectives of children that are going through transing their gender and all of this kind of stuff, and the question is, okay, I'm not like if you want to have that, like that view wants to be out there, that's one thing, but why are we funding this? And that's why I said in the hearing, right. It's like the reason why Disney Channel executives and History Channel and you name it are not here having to answer or account for their content is because they're not taking taxpayer dollars, but because you are. Guess what? I get to have a thoughtful question about why is my taxpayers funding episodes, about helping kids figure out how to trans.
And that's a view that some Americans have. And as you said, it's fine to have that view. We just don't have to pay for it, especially if it's if it's not balanced with the opposite view.
Right.
It's also a little bizarre that NPR and PBS, who are probably the most anti-2A, media bias, are now suddenly saying we should arm trans. It's kind of strange.
They're saying that.
The Rainbow Reload episode that I think you're referring to here. Well, it is. Are we at least hopeful that maybe this Congress has a chance to really act and
look at you, Congressman?
So I'm looking at you. So to me, I've been here for 2 years. I was extremely frustrated for the first 2 years under the Biden administration. I thought we had the majority. I really wanted our leadership to fight harder, to kind of leverage things like the shutdown, leverage moments like the debt ceiling to get really big wins and cut some of these things. And I again saw a lot of my colleagues back off and really, there's quite a bit of Republicans that support all of this spending.
It's a handful. For NPR and PBS, it's like a handful in each chamber.
And so right now, the question is, can we finally defund it? And I think that the only thing that's giving us that is the Trump card. Is Trump and Doge is demonstrating tremendous courage. They're coming in and they're basically taking action and asking for forgiveness later, right? Like, and Congress really needs to come in and behind the, backfill them with policy and substantive changes to our spending that backs up what the Trump administration is doing. I think that's the only way we'll be able to cut funding for.
Well, look what they did with USAID, the Department of Education. The Department of Education was a very good EO that could serve as a model here, and that the executive order in the Department of Education asked Secretary McMahon to do all she could to eliminate it by working through Congress. But in the meantime, they were going to start sending other programs to different departments and paring down the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. I think that is a very useful tool to do with the CPB. I think, in my opinion, having looked at this for years, for almost 2 decades, the answer is to dissolve the CPB, which was set out by Congress, so that you need to find a congressional way to do it. But again, you can pare down the CPB. The CPB does 2 things. It takes the money that you appropriate, not you, but you appropriate it, but the Congress appropriates, and then it distributes that money to NPR, PBS, and over 1,500 different radio and TV stations around the country, who then turn around and send part of that money back as fees. NPR and Catherine Marr said, "Oh no, that's other money." But as Representative Jordan said, "Well, money's fungible. So once you send that money, it comes back." And she agreed. Okay, fine, money's fungible. So paring down, but there's something definitely that can be done with an EO. There's something that you can do in Congress to defund, working to defund, just appropriating no money, and then use rescission to take back the money that was appropriated in the CR The CR, the CPB its budget is 2 years ahead. So the CR that passed, 3 weeks ago?
Just about.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, that appropriated $535 million. You can use rescission to take that back. And then you can cut the funding for fiscal year 28. I mean, there are many things to do, perhaps all of the above. You're the parliamentarian.
No, I'm new here. I'm still figuring it out. But I think you're right. Like the idea that the executive branch has one tool, which is rescissions. They also have impoundment, which is a whole nother conversation.
So you do one or the other.
Yeah.
Impoundment. I think you can do one or the other, impoundment or rescission.
And so I think that they're trying to see what the Supreme Court would say about undoing the Impoundment Control Act. I think that that's an unconstitutional
I understand that
act.
they want to test this, yes.
So any number of ways. I don't care how it's done. I just want it done.
As Ronald Reagan used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. A nice Midwestern boy.
Yes.
Well, we are just about out of time, but I did love this from your opening statement too. You wrote, "I am perhaps most proud of having covered high school sports for the Boston Herald." You're a big sports fan, all baseball guys right here. So
that's great. You know, I thought I was going to be a sports writer all my life. I thought I was going to wear nothing but Hawaiian shirts and wear funny hats and smoke cigars and drink beer, go to St. Louis, go to Los Angeles, and then I did it for a bit, and then I graduated to other things. So now my youngest son, who is very, very intelligent, does very well in school, wants to be a sports writer. And my wife is like, oh, my God, no. Let him do what he wants now. Because look, I started writing high school sports, and I did 10,000 other things. I was a foreign correspondent, went to Afghanistan, was arrested in Panama, then worked for the Bush administration. You know, so it's a great start in life.
It's a very distinguished career.
And you were very happy as a sports writer, I think.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I haven't worked in the sports media. They're not all sweet peaches in there.
No,
industry
that's true. That's true. But think about it. Your job is to go to the ballpark every day?
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's worse places to be.
I used to live with somebody who, when I would complain about going to the ballpark, she'd remind me, you could be roofing. So
right.
That's
so that year that I worked for the Herald, I had a pass to Fenway Park, and I caught at least an inning of all 81 home games.
Wow.
Imagine.
good for you.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Sounds like bliss.
That's an accomplishment. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Great insight, as always. You can always follow their social media accounts on X at Gundy Salvis.
Yes.
Did I say that?
That's Gonzalez in Latin. Very good.
Gundy Salvis and at Rep Eric Burleson. You can catch Fresh Freedom on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, X, and Rumble. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Stand strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for freedom.